Today on Nursing Matters, nurse burnout is not a personal failure. I'm Christina, and this is your daily dose. Let's get into it. Because I want to start with something that might feel uncomfortable, but it needs to be said out loud regardless. If you are exhausted, if you feel detached from work, if you dread walking into your shift, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not weak, you're not bad at copying, you're not failing at being a nurse. You are responding exactly how a human being responds when they're put inside a system that asks for more than it gives. And somewhere along the way, we started telling nurses that burnout is something they need to fix about themselves. And today, we're going to dismantle that. A 2026 Nurse Burnout Index found that 62% of nurses report experiencing burnout symptoms, with ICU, ED, and med-surg nurses reporting the highest rates. 62%. Let's just pause there. That's not a small group, and that's not an outlier. That is not a handful of people who just can't handle it. That is the majority of the nursing workforce. And yet, look at how burnout is still being framed. We hear things like, you need better work-life balance. Have you tried mindfulness? Make sure you're taking care of yourself. And listen, I'm not against any of those things. But let me be very clear. When more than half of your workforce is burnt out, that is not a wellness problem. That's a structural problem wearing a wellness costume. Because if this were truly an individual resilience problem, we wouldn't see entire units, entire specialties, entire systems experiencing the same thing at the same time. Burnout at that scale is not personal, it's systemic. And when we mislabel a systemic issue as a personal one, we put the burden of fixing it on the person who has the least power to change it. If you're getting value from this, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. And for more career tools, job strategies, and resources you can actually use, head to rnnet.org. That's rnnet.org. Now let's keep going. I've spent 20 years inside healthcare talent and onboarding. I've watched nurses come in excited, hopeful, ready to do meaningful work. And I've watched that energy slowly erode. Not because they stopped caring, but because the environment made it harder and harder to keep caring. I've seen organizations respond to burnout with yoga apps, pizza parties, gratitude journals, and resilience training. And again, none of those things are inherently bad, but they are completely misaligned with the actual problem. Because burnout is not about whether you took a bubble bath. It's about whether your workload is sustainable. It's about whether you have the staffing support you need. It's about whether you feel psychologically safe to speak up. It's about whether your leadership sees you or just schedules you. Burnout happens when there is a constant mismatch between what is being asked of you and what is humanly possible to give. And nurses internalize this. That's the part that really bothers me the most. They start to think, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe I need to be stronger. Maybe everyone else is handling this better than I am. And I want to interrupt that narrative immediately because it's not true. What you're feeling is a rational response to an irrational situation. If you're running nonstop for 12 hours, if you're short-staffed, if you're carrying emotional weight from patients and families, if you're documenting late into your shift just to stay compliant, of course you're exhausted. Of course you feel depleted. That's not a character flaw. That is cause and effect. And here's something else that doesn't get talked about enough. Burnout is not just physical exhaustion. It's emotional erosion. It's when you stop feeling like yourself at work. It's when the version of you that showed up on day one starts to disappear. You become more transactional, more guarded, more numb. Not because you want to be, but because it's the only way to survive mentally in that environment. And then Here's the part that really hits. You start to feel guilty for feeling that way. You think, I used to care more. What happened to me? Nothing happened to you. You adapted. You adapted to a system that required more than it replenished. And adaptation kept you going. But it came at a cost. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Saying burnout is systemic does not mean you are powerless. It means the solution has to be bigger than surface level fixes, because no amount of self-care can compensate for chronic overdemand. You can't meditate your way out of unsafe staffing ratios. You can't journal your way out of emotional overload. And pretending that you can, well, is what keeps nurses stuck in the cycle of trying harder. Instead of stepping back and asking, what actually needs to change here? So here's the one thing I want you to do this week. Not 10 things, not a complete life overhaul, just one thing. Identify one boundary and set it. And I want you to hear me when I say this. It does not have to be dramatic. It has to be sustainable, because sustainable is what creates change. Here are some real examples. Not checking your work email on your days off. Leaving on time at least twice a week. Saying no to picking up an extra shift when you can't. Taking your full break, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Just one. Pick one that feels doable for you, but slightly uncomfortable. Because that's where growth actually happens. And when you set that boundary, you're doing something powerful. You're sending a signal to yourself first, but that time, that energy, and your well-being matter. And the first few times you do it, it might feel wrong. You might feel guilty. You might even say, I should be doing more. That feeling is not truth. That feeling is conditioning. It's what happens when you've been in an environment that normalizes overextension. But the more you practice that boundary, the more it becomes your new normal. And here's why this matters. One boundary practiced consistently does more for your resilience than any wellness program ever designed. Because boundaries change how you show up. They protect your energy. They create space for recovery. And they remind you that you are not just a nurse, you are a human being first. So if you take nothing from today, take this. Burnout is not a personal failure, it's a signal. It's a signal that something in your environment is not sustainable. And you don't fix that by becoming smaller, quieter, or more accommodating. You start by protecting yourself, one boundary at a time. This is Nursing Matters, and this is the conversation that needs to be happening more in healthcare, because nurses don't need to be fixed. The systems they're working in do. If this episode resonated with you, send it to another nurse who needs to hear this today, because chances are they're feeling it too. I'm Christina, and that's your daily dose. Keep showing up because nursing matters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Nursing Matters Daily Dose. Are you interested in more career resources? Then hop on over to the RN Network at rnnet.org. Also, while you're at it, hit that like and subscribe button and share this episode with one nurse who really needs to hear it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.